I want to thank all of the witnesses. I appreciate your testimony today. My questions will be directed towards Mr. Yang and Mr. Browne. And I just want to assure you both that your written submissions are most likely going through translation right now. They have to be delivered in both English and French, and I'm sure we will all have them very soon. And I hope that you will pass on my thanks to the Hagus and the legislators for sharing your valuable time with us today. So my first question, I leave it to the both of you to decide who is the best to answer, is could you please explain why federal negotiations haven't supported Tla'amin's requests to negotiate an enforcement agreement as set out in the treaty process? And of course, the treaty itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. So I work with Tla'amin on treaty negotiations. The problem is implementation. So we sit down, we negotiate something in a treaty. It's not perfect, but it's constitutionally protected. And then we try and activate it, and you look around and the negotiators are gone onto another file. And we have a real problem with implementation. On the provincial side, they have appointed implementation managers. We can pick up the phone and call them. The federal government sort of has that, but not to the same strength. So Mr. Yang may want to talk about the provincial side. We're having detailed discussions with the province on highways authority to deal with speeders racing through the community. We just haven't had that level of engagement yet on the federal side, and hoping that we will. So hope that answers your question.
Thank you. That is extremely helpful. There was testimony about, and I've of course heard about the over harvesting of shellfish, and that is definitely a significant concern. I'm just wondering if I could get some more thoughts on what do you think needs to be done to encourage DFO to cooperate with Tla'amin on enforcement, because that is key. We hear again and again from constituents across the whole riding, there's not enough DFO folks on the ground doing the work. We see Guardian programs starting across many nations, but of course that level of enforcement is simply not there. So I'm just wondering if you could talk about what next steps need to be done to encourage DFO to actually understand these roles and how important they are.
Thank you very much for the question. I'll make a few comments and see if Mr. Yang wishes to add to them. First of all, there's no treaty funding for enforcement. It's a blank, it's a gap in the treaty. Tla'amin is consistently rejected for Guardian funding. We apply under the Guardian program, we don't get it. So Tla'amin has to take money that could be used for urgent housing, education, health, social needs, and hire its own guardians with money it doesn't have. And so that's problem number one. Problem number two is there are many fine folks at DFO, but as an entity, I'm sorry to say it's trapped in the colonial history. It's racist, it's arrogant, it's defensive. It does not work with First Nations. It's anti-reconciliation. I can give you many examples of that, but DFO consistently breaks the law. They do not follow the treaty. They do not follow the basic law of set out by the Supreme Court of Canada to put conservation first, followed by Aboriginal and treaty rights. They think it's their job to provide opportunities for sports and commercial fisheries, and the resources be damned. So just one quick example, the name for the Tla'amin village is Teeshosum, which is spelled Teeshosum. That means waters that are white, milky white from herring spawn. That is because for thousands of years, Tla'amin managed that herring fishery and kept it sustainable to feed their people. DFO came onto the picture and wiped out that stock because they, in their arrogance, decided that that was part of an aggregate stock, not a local stock, and that they could authorize commercial harvests on it. Tla'amin stopped fishing, but the stock is gone. So that's part of the many issues with DFO. But back to the enforcement, what I see as a culture and as an entity is that DFO thinks that they can do it better, and they don't want anyone else to do it. And maybe I'll ask Mr. Yang if he has comments. Thank you.
Thank you. That's my colleague, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Blaney, for that question. I think one of the biggest challenges is it has been pointed out by my colleague is the lack of willingness by DFO to engage in a productive and progressive manner with Indigenous communities such as Tla'amin to enforce natural resource protection laws. The other challenge, it seems, is a lack of willingness by DFO to cross-delegate or designate our enforcement officers to take some of those initiatives off of their plate. If there's one thing that we can speak confidently on is the DFO, the fisheries officers are an under-resourced federal enforcement body. For our region, the Cassette region, there are only two or three officers at any given time that have a large area to patrol. And that's the same with a lot of other parts of Canada. They do not have the physical ability to patrol and enforce their mandate, let alone the desires by Tla'amin Nation or other Indigenous communities to protect their resources and their traditional practices. And I think if there were direction by the government to DFO, clear direction for them to start engaging in actually working with nations to enforce and protect natural resources, I think that would be a very good start. And the push from the government to the ministry to start cross-designating and start funding Indigenous Guardian programs that are well within the Act, as well as treaty sections within the Fisheries Act itself. Those will be very good starts.
Thank you very